Hey everybody, hello and welcome. It is Vintage Super League time. I'm joined by Chris Pikula, one of the big matches this week. Everybody's been talking about it, buzzing on Twitter. You and Efro have both made it to 4-0, and now the schedule happens to have you paired this week.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I haven't been really that excited about a vintage Super League match in a while. This one I'm pretty excited about.
It's just the fact that it's 4-0, the fact that it's Eric, the fact that it's the shop's mirror.
Yeah, it's all that stuff. I'm kind of excited. I like this Shops deck again. I'm kind of interested in this matchup. And it just feels good to be 4-0. You know, last time I went 3-0, I lost two in a row. I was like, oh, but now it's good to be 4-0.
That makes sense. Now, so tell me about the matchup, right? You're on Terra Nova stacks or Terra Nova shops. He's on
Right.
Martello shops. So I guess the primary difference is he's got called out the Forge Master, the ability to go get stuff out of his library.
Well, there's a lot of differences. I mean, people on Twitter seem to think that I was the underdog, and I don't really know why that's the case. I mean, the big deals are that game one, I basically have 5 Phyrexian Metamorphs because I have 4 Metamorphs and a Sculpting Steel, and he has 1.
Okay.
And and he doesn't have Dismember in his deck, and I have Revokers and Null Rods. So the idea that his Forge Masters are ever going to do anything besides just be a 3/5 seems pretty unlikely.
Okay.
Um, and another interesting thing is he only has 18 lands in his deck, and I have 24 lands in my deck.
Oh wow.
So it just seems like game one, it's very easy for him to be short mana. His deck's more expensive and has less mana.
Yeah, if you're both playing mana denial strategies at their heart, the fact that you have 6 more lands than him has got to make a difference.
I mean, he has a Black Lotus and a Mana Crypt. I don't have those, so that makes up 2 spots.
Sure.
But you know, we both have Revokers. What's weird, Dismember is like a big tempo play in this matchup. Although it's a pain to cast with Loathsome Golem out. And then the other weird thing is that after boarding, you know, we both have stuff. There's just a lot of Crucibles after boarding, and I don't know. But once again, he has 1 copy effect, and I have 6 after sideboarding. So
he can draw his awesome sideboard card. His tech is Crucible of Worlds primarily.
right.
But you can just copy it, and then you've got it too.
Right. So a huge portion of the time, it's much more likely for me to have a Crucible without him having one than vice versa.
Okay.
I feel like I have an edge, but I don't understand the matchup that well. I've never really played it, so I don't understand. There might be some weird tempo stuff that I'm missing because he has Tangle Wires, which I don't have.
Okay. But you like your chances.
I think I like my chances. Although it's possible that whoever wins the roll is still favored, but I'm not sure on that. There's a lot of land. I mean, we have a lot of lands in our. My deck has 29 mana sources, which has to be good, because you know it's so easy for either of us to draw an opening hand that is just a bunch of Spheres of Resistance, and whoever goes, you know, if you go first and you have a mana heavy hand, you're just going to throw them into play because why not? Yeah, I don't know. I think that the fact that I have 4 Dismembers and 6 copy effects feels really good in the matchup to me, because it's just so hard for him to really get ahead without me just getting it right back on my turn. I mean, I guess after sideboarding, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with my Null Rods yet, so I don't really want to talk about it. But
Sure.
You know, the Forge Master, end of turn getting like a Steel Hellkite could be problematic because then I can't metamorph it before it hits me.
Okay.
But I don't know. I think that opening hands are going to be really dependent just because, you know, like, you know, it's a mana denial strategy. Mishra's Workshop's really important. We'll see. It should be fun. I wish we could play more than one match. I'm that excited about it.
Well, for whatever it's worth, you won my unscientific Twitter poll. More favorites of my tweet than there were retweets, so whatever that's worth. I think Twitter did seem to think you were more likely to win.
Yeah.
I don't know, or just nobody felt like pushing the retweet button. One or the other. Now, the first match we've got coming up is David Williams versus Kai.
Right. So this is essentially a replay of last week's LSV versus Steve, right?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's exactly
it is.
It's the two people who worked with each other. Now it's the other two people of those two pairs playing each other, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, little lower in the standings with these two for whatever that's
yes, and there is zero chance now of the Elish Norn surprise.
worth. Luis used it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that I don't think Williams is going to leave himself dead to Elish Norn now. He's going to leave in something, probably.
Yeah, he'll have Swords of Plowshares probably.
Or at least he'll know to disenchant the Black Lotus.
Now, who do you think's favored in that matchup? And we saw Luis win it, but Luis did win it from positions where it looked like Steve was actually winning both of those games at various points.
Yes, and I was gonna say something about how good LSV is at Magic, but then Williams was Kai.
Yeah, it's Kai.
I don't really understand their deck that well. Like, is it just an Oath deck that has a bunch of turn 1 and 2 wins also? Is that basically how they've designed it?
Well, I think what they've done is it's a show and tell deck.
Right.
So it can show and tell Omniscience into play. It can show and tell Grizzlebrand into play. I mean, it can also Oath the Grizzlebrand into play. So you wind up with a bunch of ways to get the Grizzlebrand onto the board. But then you have this show and tell plan that basically you're not just pulled to Grafdigger's Cage.
Right.
So it's an Oath deck that doesn't lose to the sideboard card that basically everyone in the league always shows up with.
Right. I did not watch. This was the match I didn't see last week, Kai versus Efro.
Okay.
So I don't actually know what happened.
Yeah.
I just never get to cast a spell, basically.
Basically. His draws were pretty bad. Eric's were pretty good. It was not it was not a slow game. It was not super interactive.
Right.
This matchup seems like it should be fairly interactive, though.
Oh, yeah, this matchup should be very interesting. Like, if we look at how many counterspells does Williams actually have? He has quite a few, because I mean, he has
he's got
Pyroblasts.
4 Force, 4 Misstep, 2 Flusterstorm, 2 Pyros, and a Misdirection.
Right, so he can counter show and tells with just 1 mana in game 1.
Yeah,
so
2 Pyros in the main deck is definitely an investment in being able to win counter fights, and it will happen to help him out against show and tell. Yeah, I've got to play my Merfolk against those Pyroblasts and Menendian's hands. It's kind of annoying. 3rd Pyro on the board.
Yeah, I mean,
Gas Maidens don't seem like a great call for this matchup.
Based on how the Menendian decks have looked, and this is basically a Menendian deck, I'm going to guess that they have the edge. It just seems like his decks have been so good at just ending up with a handful of counterspells. Mm-hmm. And he's had some disasters that led to game losses, but they've all seemed like they shouldn't have happened that way. Like
but the disasters come from being threat light, right? The deck only has 4 Monastery Mentors. That's the entire creature set. That's the entire victory condition. 4 copies of Monastery Mentor.
That's true.
Steve, I actually think sideboarded 1 out against Luis. I mean, I think he was down to 3. I mean, maybe that was right. Maybe that was wrong. We could argue about that. But I mean, it is certainly true that this deck plays totally differently when it has an early Monastery Mentor versus when it doesn't have an early Monastery Mentor.
True.
I mean, if they don't just drop 1 in the first couple of turns, then suddenly they're playing a control game where their victory condition is they have to tap mana and it takes a couple of turns to kill. Right. I don't know. You may be right that Williams' Mentor deck has the deck edge here, but I'm going to pick the player. I'm going to go for Kai to finally get off the schneid.
I mean, I guess he's due. Kai is due.
I mean, I know that neither one of us thinks the world actually works that way, but yes, he has to be due.
Yeah, and once again, going first in this matchup might be pretty big too. Like, just because anytime Kai draws any opening hand where Kai has fast mana means that there's a reasonable shot of show and tell or oath before Williams can do anything. So
yeah, I think game 1 has got to be edge Kai. Just the ability to go Forbidden Orchard, Oath of Druids is so powerful. You know, Steve basically has to have a Force of Will to deal with that plan. Yeah, I mean, if Steve doesn't have a Force of Will, he just loses to that draw.
One interesting thing is that where the Mentor is maybe a little different than Pyromancer is it's even easier to time walk into a win with Mentor. So you can probably win more games with Oath on the
That's
table.
fair.
Not against
That's
the
fair.
Orc, probably, but
Oath is ridiculous against the Delver deck because the Pyromancer can't really outrace it. But Mentor, at least you have a chance. You're hitting so much faster, so much harder that you at least have a chance. I'll buy that.
yeah. So I don't know. I'm interested to see this. Yeah, it's funny how I feel like so far this season, the matches have been really alternating between great match, blowout, great match, blowout. I'm hoping we get mostly great matches tonight.
We'll settle for a mix. But yeah, it's fair.
Tell me, which match are you hoping is a blowout, Randy?
Well, see, I have these wastelands in my deck, and Steve Menendia just shows up with like 4 lands in his deck every week. So yeah, I'm hoping that won't be the most interactive of matches, but we'll see how that goes.
Oh, so yeah. Oh, so that's who you play, Steve?
I play Steve, yeah.
That's got to be good for you, right?
I think so. I mean, I believe I am favored. However, if he gets an early mentor, he can outrace me. Like, my 20 creature deck is going to lose the race to his 4 creature deck. Of course, my 20 creature deck managed to lose the race to like a single Mutavault somehow last week. I can't figure out how that happened.
I don't think there was a point in that match where you had more creatures in play than I did. If you count,
no, it was crazy. It was my draw. Well, basically, I mean,
but I have
played it very well.
I have 10 land creatures in my deck. I have 10 man lands in my deck.
Sure. I still felt, I played my deck because I wanted to have wastelands, and so not being able to do it with a Mutavault was frustrating. And I don't know. I felt like I was
so many wastelands game 2.
Say again?
Game 2, you had so many wastelands.
I did, and then I used them all, and then you managed to mana lock me on like turn 10. Somehow, I had to use 2 of those wastelands, though. I figured I could have potentially held on to one of them, which might have mattered later on. But yeah, the way our draws lined up was huge.
Yeah. I
fortunate for me.
Definitely
you kept 6 lands, and I turned it into a great draw by wasting the first 3 of them.
Yep, that is accurate. So, man, I'm excited about tonight. I haven't been that excited about Vintage Super League in a while. Like once I started losing, maybe last season. But this, I'm at the height of excitement right now.
Sure, 4-0, new territory for you.
Yeah.
It's the other matchup we haven't talked about. We've got Rich Shea, Tom Martell, which is going to be an interesting matchup. See if Tom can finally get a W. And then hanging out in round 5, how about Luis Scott Vargas versus Bob Maher?
Yeah, I'm not going to be awake for that one, but it sounds pretty great. Maher's deck is an interesting take. I wonder. I haven't really dug deep into what the difference is between these various.
Yeah, he's on Mentor, but he's got 2 Snapcasters and 2 Jaces.
Right, his deck's much fancier. He's got Cavern of Souls. Like he's
main deck Mystic Remora.
Yeah, I don't really know if I understand the Remoras.
He's basically saying everybody plays blue decks, so whatever. You're going to pay 4 for your instance, you're going to let me draw some extra cards. Or how about you can just do nothing for 7 turns?
Sure. I mean, obviously but we haven't really. Has that worked in Vintage? I mean, is something new about Vintage now that we'd suddenly think that would work? Because it's not like Mystic Remora has been.
It's been around on and off. Somebody played Mystic Remora against me at Vintage Friday Night Magic last week.
Oh, weird.
It's around. It's not. I mean, it's never been so devastating. Like Martell ran Mystic Remoras last season, actually, at one point.
Yeah, and that was a quick 0-3, I think, wasn't it?
Well, okay.
I just.
Fair point.
You know what else is interesting? It's really interesting that we're. Oh, I guess so. Menendian is playing 4 Gush this time, but Bob is playing less than 4. I like the idea that Gush is like now a card. Sometimes he will just play like 2 and 3 of.
Well, I think it depends whether you have Fast Bond.
Yeah,
like, it's really hard to play 4 Gush without a Fast Bond. At least that's my take on it.
What if you've actually written a book about Gush? Does that change your ability to play Gush without Fast Bond?
Maybe.
All right. Well, Steve says yes because. So you know what's interesting? Another thing that's interesting about the Menendian is does Williams have this too? Does Williams have the Stony Silence?
No, just Steve.
That's interesting. Stony Silence over Null Rod.
Yeah, Menendian has 2 Dax and a Stony Silence, if I'm not mistaken. He was definitely expecting some Shops decks to show up this week.
All right. So they ready to go or what?
They're getting there. Almost.
Well, we could. Yeah, I'm basically impatient now. I just want to see the play.
Sure.
I'm fired up.
Yeah, standings could go either way this week too. I feel like you could either see like the top and the bottom start to move away. Like if Luis beats Bob, there'll basically be 3 of you at X1 or better, and there'll
Right.
be, there could be a gap in the standings. Could also see, the 04s could turn into 05s down the bottom. I mean, this match has a lot to say with what happens at the bottom of the standings, right? David versus Kai.
For sure, and I know that David has definitely gone into not last mode. Like he's really like I want to
Yeah.
be in Vintage Super League Season 3, so I just need
Yes.
the matches. So.
Yeah. I mean, we can actually look at his deck list. Here's